and welcome to another episode of I saw it on Instagram, but there's no way I'm buying it. Hello! Thank you. Has anyone else ever noticed that their puppy's paws smell like Doritos? Or is that just yours? I need some coffee! Pardon the AC, which is off right now, and still making very odd noises. Y'all, it's been over a month since I filmed like a normal video like this, you know, where I talk incessantly and then make a thing. I've been working on that new sampler pattern for so long and I'm still editing. I was supposed to be editing videos today, but it felt like time to take a little break. Just like a day, maybe two, because I don't know how long this project's gonna take. So having spent a month working on pretty much just that one thing, like I've sewn a little bit on the castle piece on the side, but I have not paused for a day to do another project. That basically meant I was just stockpiling ideas, mostly sewing of clothing ideas. Oh goody, and now there's lawn care happening. Well, this is what I haven't missed for the last month. Lately, one of my favorite ways to waste time, because I can just call it research, is scrolling through the Explore page on my Instagram. It's kind of a hot mess. There's a bunch of celebrity clickbait that I couldn't care less about, and yet I still click on about 40% of the time. And then there's gardening, and there's food, and there's like vintage clothing, and historical costuming, and modern fashion all thrown in there. And it's actually pretty decent at knowing my interests, except for the whole celebrity clickbait part. So I just scroll through and then save any article of clothing that is interesting to me for any reason. And of course you can't like put a note on there that's like, hey, here's why I was interested in that. So going back through there is gonna be interesting, because I don't know if I saved it because it's like an outfit I want to recreate, or I really liked the fabric, or like there was a cool like pleating thing in the back on the third picture. That's for future me to figure out. But I thought I would start kind of lightly in my attempts to cull through all of those saved posts and do what I want with them. There was a dress that I saw recently-ish on Instagram, and ironically I did not apparently save this post, so whoops. It wasn't that interesting of a dress. It was a style that you see frequently all over the place. I've seen it a bunch of times. The reason that it caught my eye in this instance though was because I immediately was like, I bet I could make that without a pattern. Oh, my eye just did a weird twitch. So that's what we're gonna try to do today. Let me show you what it looks like. Well, for starters, let me see if I can even find a blank page in here. I think it's time for a new sketchbook. Ignore that. I already made that. So it's basically, you know, a little neck piece, and then comes down like so with like gathers here, and then there's a belt around the waist, and then a long skirt. So yeah, like that's incredibly simple. But here is why it's interesting to me. I think that this can be made out of 4 pieces of fabric. This right here, one long rectangle, which will then be folded in half to form a sash that this actually like ties in the back around the neck. Then you have the front piece, which is just a rectangle of fabric. The top gets gathered together to go into the neck piece. Then starting about here at waist height, it gets sewn to the back piece, which is also just a rectangle. Well, I should say shorter. Starting at the waist, so it's a backless dress, this one gets gathered into the waist tie, which is another long rectangle folded in half and forming a sash. Does that terrible sketch make any sense whatsoever? In my head, this works, which, as we've learned from previous projects, makes it like a 50-50 chance that it actually will work. The few concerns that I have, if I just have a rectangle for the front of the dress, when I cinch up the top, it might be too bulky, especially if it's just coming from like this big of an area, and it might just be like a lot of fabric right there, too many gathers. But in that case, I can always just trim down the sides of the rectangle from the waist point up to the top so that there's not as much fabric being cinched in. So I feel like that should be a fairly easy fix. My biggest concern, because the dress will be backless and it'll just be this piece of fabric going, you know, across the boobs, I'm afraid that it won't actually go across the boobs. Particularly because the front piece will be entirely loose. There will be nothing constricting it at the waist until you tie that waist tie around and cinch it in. But I feel like once you tie it, it should go into its proper place and stay there. Should being the key word. Did I prepare at all to do this project today? Did I select fabric in advance and make sure that I have thread in that fabric color? You know I didn't. At some point down the road, probably when I have a dedicated place to put my sewing machine that isn't a bookshelf, I should get like a collection of sewing thread in general colors, because right now I have like 5 spools of thread in a very weird selection of colors. I think I always have white. That means every time I do a new project, particularly if it's like a specifically colored fabric, I have to go out and buy thread. And leaving the house is not my favorite thing to do. When we finally do get a house, I'm gonna give it a name, like fancy British people, but it'll just be the Hermitage. Okay, let's go see if I have fabric. Adventure time! Oofity poof. Oh, it's very yellow in here. That's all right, we're going with it. Hi! Is that your sock? Rawr. Rawr. Oh, it's so stinky. Can you catch it? Yeah. So there's basically 2 things I need in the fabric for this. One, it needs to be fairly thin and flowy without being like super see-through, because both the front and the back are gonna have to be gathered, one into the waist and one into the neck. It can't be like a stiff fabric. That would be very uncomfortable. The second thing that I need is a lot of fabric, because I decided to make this a maxi dress, which like I could always cop out and make it a shorter dress. I could do this exact same style and do it like to my knee and it would still be really cute. Ew, it's very wet now. But I'd prefer to make it a maxi dress. I think the best option that I have for this is this sheet set I have over here. Oh Lord. It's not like the most bright and fun fabric, but it at least has a pattern to it. It's soft, it seems like you can't see through it. And I have both the top and the bottom sheet, I believe, like king sized. So this is what we're going with, because it is all that I have. Let's go do stuff. Oh, now it's not so yellow, so you can tell better. It's gray. All right, so I am going to take some measurements and I don't know, figure something out. I don't know what I'm doing, man. Oh Lord. So after wallowing for a while and getting absolutely nowhere, I finally put my hair up in a tight and high ponytail, which in Charlie Land is the equivalent of turning on my brain. I also put on some shorts under this dress so I could stop flashing the camera. Why am I always wearing this dress on sewing days? Undies. Sorry. I folded over that top edge thing on the top sheet and cut out the entire length to be the waist sash. This fabric cuts like butter, which I'm assuming means it's hella polyester. You're very unhelpful. No. Then, despite the puppy's resistance, I turned the remaining top sheet inside out so that I could do my favorite thing ever, drawing all over it to figure out what the crap I'm doing. The rectangle of fabric concept went out the window fast because, as I suspected, that would be way too much fabric gathered around the neck, or not enough fabric to give the skirt the required amount of swoosh. I was going off of sort of like circle skirt concepts-ish, but after like 5 minutes of measuring and marking, I flipped to my other go-to concept, winging it! A method that has never once failed me. Please don't look that up. This is gonna go great. I ended up with this sort of triangular curved thing, and then I remembered pockets. Pockets. It's no big deal, I just need to cut out some pockets. It's just that I had forgotten to remember them until this moment. There was a decent amount of fabric left from this top sheet, so I cut out another long strip to be the necktie sash thing, and then I figured I could probably just use this leftover chunk as the back part of the skirt. It's long enough. So here we have the front piece, the 2 back pieces, which I'll sew into one, the pockets, the necktie, and the waist tie. And I still haven't even touched the bottom sheet, so if any of this goes AWOL, I have plenty of backup. And then, like all good sewists, I proceeded to procrastinate my ass off before actually getting out the machine by calling a lunch break and roasting a whole pineapple. It's a whole thing. We went to a Brazilian steakhouse, they had roasted pineapple, it was divine, I bought a pineapple, Matt left town on business, I roasted it anyway, and now I have to eat this whole pineapple by myself. Oh, and I roasted cherries because I had them. Highly recommend. Having consumed lunch and partial pineapple, I proceeded to set up the living room for sewing, which just involves, you know, mild furniture rearranging. Turns out I did have some gray thread, but no empty bobbins to put it on, so here begins the glorious tradition of layering colors. I started by attaching those two back pieces into one, and it seemed like a good idea to get fancy on this winging it made from a bedsheet dress, so I did French seams. I've got the room after all. And this is when I realized that this fabric is, like, sticky? Like, not to the touch, but it doesn't slide easily over the plastic of the machine, or the wooden desk for that matter. It's like frictiony. Most interesting. While I was on this piece, I went ahead and stitched across the top so that I could gather it in to 16 inches total. It didn't seem like enough gathering while I was doing it, but looking from the front, I think this is actually good because I don't want it getting too bulky. I gathered up the top of the front piece to 6 inches, then I figured it might be best to just hem all the way up both sides of that piece and not have to do French seams on the sides while trying to get the pockets in there. I really can't complicate my process too much. Then it was time for sash making shenanigans. Ow. What I love most about rivers is you can't step in the same— Ow! Nah, close enough. Ah. Calm down. Yeah. Bonjour. Good day. But sir, the inventor's daughter? Is LeFou actually from Jersey? Gonna have to get out the iron soon. Brute. Damn it. Ah, bucket. Could be bad. I got 20. Beep. That's not right. That's right. Blah, 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 blah. Bum, bum, bum. Aha! The what? That's right. Akaluka. She won't say it now. Oh, tell me I did that right. Ha-ha! Got the back skirt attached to the waistband sash thing, and it makes a pretty decent apron. But yeah, I think this is working. Just imagine fabric being here. My love of a circle skirt is making me think there's not going to be enough swoosh here, but I'm setting that aside for now, because not every skirt needs to be giant, right? Right. Totally right. Here's where I became a little unsure of what order to sew stuff together, as usual. I decided to tackle the neck sash because that's kind of up there on its own, so I should be able to fully finish that section before figuring out how to attach the two sides. Turned out the 6 inches at the top of the front piece was kind of too big and looked a little weird, so I ended up turning over the sides even more and knocking it down to about 4 inches. Then I stopped filming for a while, but you didn't miss much. Basically just me struggling to put in a pocket, despite my announcement a few projects ago that I had officially figured out how to properly put in a pocket. And let me tell you, I finally figured out how to properly put in pockets. I think my brain is erasing too much info while I sleep. I did finally figure it out, but also managed to put the pocket so very, very low. Oh no. Why is it so low? And since you missed it, here's footage of me putting in the other pocket with a smidge more confidence. And higher up this time, of course. I'd rather have off-even pockets than redo the last one, though. And with the whole thing attached into one somewhat workable dress, it was time for the hand sewing. Hand sewing. Here's the thing. It's a much slower process, but if you have no idea what you're doing, some good old hand sewing can save your bootay. So I've got quite a bit to do on this dress because, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. I was considering leaving the hem for the next day, but I pushed through, got it hemmed up, and oh my god, there's so much dog fur on this dress. That is very unhelpful. What you doing under there? Oh no. So I decided a full wash and ironing would be necessary prior to the final product. Commitment, man. I usually throw in the towel on the last 5% because I just want to wear the thing, but not today. I even sacrificed 2 fingernails and got burned during this ironing job. Ow! But I guess it was worth it. I am still not used to this whole finishing a project in one day thing. It's quite nice. Sewing is nice. Well, this was a delightful little break from sitting at the computer editing. It turned out better than I expected in some ways, and then not as good as I expected in other ways. Turns out that this fabric is a little heavier and thicker than I at first thought it was. It felt very light and breezy when I first picked it up. And then once I started actually sewing with it, and especially once I put it on, I was like, ooh, this is a bed sheet. This is not exactly light and breezy. Again, probably because it's completely synthetic. Yeah, I think if I wore this on a hot day, I would completely soak it with sweat. That being said, it still drapes and flows quite beautifully. I left the hem really long, basically just for dramatic effect. So if I ever decide to actually wear this dress somewhere, I will have to hem it up again. I'm not sure that I will though, simply because I feel like you can still really tell it's a bed sheet. Maybe it's just because I've been staring at it too long. The design itself and everything, that turned out pretty darn well. It's not perfect. There are some things that I could have done better, but it even looks pretty clean on the inside. It kind of is making me want to get some other fabric and make this again. Some actually lighter, breezier, but not see-through fabric. The part that I was most worried about was that it would be kind of too loose and there would be the possibility of gapage here where it would not be great for it to gape. That didn't happen, and even when the sash is not tied, this still does not have enough fabric there or enough lack of fabric there to show anything. But I think I was expecting there to be more fabric in general with my original concept that if this fabric is thin and light, I could do a much wider section and a lot more gathering up here, which I really could not do. So without it being tied, it's actually kind of just big enough to go over my butt without having any sort of closures in it. There's no zipper, there's no buttons, there's no Velcro, there's no elastic. I have noticed that since I started sewing, so a few months now, when I look at clothing, I'm starting to look at it completely differently, far more analytically. And it reminds me back in college, the professor who taught our stagecraft and stage design classes, I remember him saying that as you're trying to train yourself to draw or paint or something like that, you start to look at things differently and you start having to notice shifts in color and lighting and shadow and curvature and stuff like that. And I've always been pretty bad at drawing and painting because I don't notice those things when I look at stuff. But in the sewing world, I'm starting to look at clothing with that kind of mindset, When I see something and I like it, I start looking for the seams and I start trying to break down how many pieces was that and how were those pieces attached. Is that gathering or is that pleats? Where does the closure on that? Looking for zippers on dresses to see if they're closed in the back or on the side. It's like a whole hobby of mine now. So yeah, I think if you're starting your sewing journey and you're wanting to make stuff on your own, trying to shift how you look at clothing can really help you start creating stuff by yourself. If you see something and you like it, then you just kind of have to break down how it was constructed. I don't know, man, I'm running out of words. Have I made my point? I can't remember. Analyze clothing that you see. It will help as you try to sew it on your own. And with that, I'm gonna go take this off because it's a little bit stuffy. And also I did interesting things with tape to my boobs to get them to kind of be slightly supported in this backless dress. Tricks I learned from a drag queen, so I need to go remove that. I will see you later.